If you would like to have full support from a programming expert via Telegram group and group coaching, check the description below. Hi everyone, my name is Joana Proença and today we're going to talk about all the exercises you need to do to be prepared for problem set 2. So the main idea of these exercises is make you prepared for the problem set 2. So we're going to see more about for loops, while loops until you are familiar and comfortable to face the problem sets. Alright, so if you would like to have full support from a programming expert, check the description below and become one of our students having full support via Telegram group and group coaching. Okay, so before we start the problems, let's see the animation about for loop and while loop. For example, if we want to print numbers from 0 to 5 using a for loop, we should do for I in range and the number 6 inside of the parentheses, and we're gonna print I. In the first iteration, the value of I will be 0 and we will print it. In the second iteration, I will be 1. The following iteration, I will be 2, so on and so forth until we have I equals to 5, and after printing it, we will stop our loop. Now let's see an example specifically with lists. Let's suppose we want to print every element of our list. We should do fruits equals to apple, banana, and orange. This is our list. And we will do for I in range, and the number we're gonna put inside of the range will be the length of our fruits list, in this case 3. And then in every iteration we're gonna print fruits on position I. In this case, we want to loop through every element in our list. That's why we're using the length of our list inside the range. In the first iteration, I will be 0. Then we're going to print the element on position 0, that is apple. Next iteration, I will be 1, and we're going to print the element on position 1, that is banana. Finally, I will be 2, and we're going to print orange. End of the for loop. We are setting the variable I equals to 1, then we are creating a while loop. Remember that the while loop, we can execute a set of statements as long as the condition is true. In our case, we're going to stay in our while loop until the value I is less than 4. So in the first iteration, I will be 1. Since 1 is less than 4, we're going to keep in our loop. Then we will print the value of I, that is 1, and increment the value I by 1. Next iteration, I will has value 2. Since 2 is less than 4, we're going to keep in our loop. Then we will print the value of I, that is 2, and increment the value of I by 1. Next iteration, I has value 3. Since 3 is less than 4, we're going to keep in our loop. Then we will print the value of I, that is 3, and increment the value of I by 1. Then we're going to check if the value of I is less than 4. Since the value of I is 4, our condition is not true anymore. So we don't continue in our while loop, and we're done with our code.
So problem 2.py is we've seen loops, but now I want you to loop. So print the values from 1 to 100. Okay? So let's do that. So I want you guys to do under 2 minutes. And so the way this works is I want to do for I in range. So the first one, if you look here on VS Code, it even gives you kind of how this works. But the first one will be where do I start? So I start at 1. Where do I end? I end at 100. But it's not inclusive. So if I actually, so what does it mean to be not inclusive? So let's say I have a range from 1 to 10. Range 1 to 10. I can actually show you guys here on the terminal. So if I do range, so list allows us to see what range does. So if I do 1 to 100, it creates a list from 1 to 99. So if I actually want, so it's not including the 100. If I want to include the 100, I need to go one more. So now you guys can see that it adds the 100. So let's do for I in range 1 to 101, we're gonna print I. Okay, so this is straightforward. let's print this. So I don't want to print 1, I want to print I. So now if I run this, oops, if I run this code, let me Python 3 problem 2. It prints 1 to 100, okay? So now within problem 1, I want you now to print the from 0 to 100, but only even numbers. There are different ways of doing this, but I want you to do using for loops. Use for loops. Try all of these under 2 minutes, guys. So one way you can do this is to do, so right now we're doing the same as we had before, but if you want only even numbers, so observe that even numbers, they skip 1, so they jump 2, right? So we can add a third argument here. Oops, that allows us to skip 2. So we print I, and this will help us. This will help us print the odd numbers, the even numbers. Okay, so let's print this. And it didn't work because, let me see, I didn't save, I think. Let's see. No, so it's because we're starting at 1. So since I want to go from 0 to 100, not 1 to 100, I put a 0 here. So it's actually, you guys see, because you guys can learn how to do. So now it's working. So now I started at 0. So observe the first thing here is where we start. The second one is where we end, not inclusive. So we don't include 101. We go up to 1 less than that. So it's the same as if you come from other programming language saying I less than 101. That's the second argument. So we don't go up to 101 exactly. And then we skip 2. So we go 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, so on and so forth. Sounds good? So this was problem 2. So try this, stop the video, try it. You have to be able to do this under 2 minutes. So you want to print the values from 1 to 100 and then print from 0 to 100, but only the even numbers, only the even numbers. So let me actually call this skipping. No, it's okay. Let's do only even numbers. So problem 2. Okay, problem 3. This is also you guys can get a good foundation in coding. So I skipped 3, so let's continue with for loop. So create a for loop. I'll actually put this here. So I put one problem at a time. So that was problem, this is problem 3. Print from 0 to 2 only the even numbers. This is the other one. Okay, so now problem 4. I want you guys to sum numbers from 1 to 100. So you're gonna do 1 to 10. So you're gonna do 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 all the way to that 10. So first things first, let's create a loop that goes up to 10. So remember, the first one is 1. So we start at 1, we go up to 10. Since it's not inclusive, we put 11. Let's first print I to see if everything is working as we expected. So we're gonna run this Python 3 problem 4 and everything is working. So now we need to add this to a variable, because otherwise we can't keep track of the sum. So we need to add 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 7 somewhere. So where do I put it? I need a variable, so I create a variable called sum. Okay? And now I'm gonna add I to sum. So I'll say sum equals sum plus I. So what am I doing here? Sum is 0. I will start at 1. So I'll do 0 plus 1, 1. And I'll put it back here. So actually, let's see what's going on using the debugger. The debugger is a great tool to understand what's going on. So we're gonna do debug. You see that the first value of I will be 1 and sum will be 0. So now we're gonna add 1 to sum and put it back at sum. So the order that things gets computed is we first do sum plus y, then we store it at sum. So what's sum? 0, what's I? 1, so now we put it at 1 at sum. So now my sum is 1. Now my I is 2, so I do 2 plus 1, 3, and I put it back at sum, 3. So I equals 3 now, sum is 3, 3 plus 3, 6. So that will go on until, let's now print the sum in the end, just so we know that it's working. There is nothing special about printing sum. Printing sum is a way for us to know what is going on, okay? So we know what the value of sum is in the end. So let's just run this code or stop the debugger. Okay, and now let's print this problem. So problem 4. And you see 55, if you add up on your calculator, you see that 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 is equals to 55. So try to do that under 5 minutes. Now problem 5. What we want now is to add the odd numbers from 1 to 100. So add the odd numbers. No, so add 1 plus 3 plus 5, which are the odd numbers, all the way to 99. So the first step is to print those numbers. So I want to print 1, 3, 5. So you need to do this step by step. So I start at 1, I go up to 99, not inclusive. So I go 1 more. Since I'm going 2 steps at a time, if I don't put anything here, it's the same as having 1. So I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I don't want to go 1 by 1. I want to go 2 by 2. So from 1 to 3 to 5. So I'm going to put a 2 here. Okay. So now let's print I. So printed 1, 3, 7, 8. So not 99, it printed up to 9. Let's save this. We want to go up to 99. Okay, so we want now to sum them. So the same thing from the previous problem, we're going to create a variable called sum. And now we're going to add I to sum. So we can do what we did last problem, sum equals sum plus I. But we can also do a shorter version. We can do plus equals I. So what's sum plus equals I? It's the same as sum equals sum plus I. Okay. So those are the same things. Here I'm gonna do plus equals I, but you need to memorize that sum equals sum plus y is the same as sum plus equals I, same thing. So in the end, when I print it, when I print sum, I'm gonna have 2500, which is the sum from 1 to 99. Okay, problem 5. So hopefully you guys are following, but you need to try this on your own. So these are all problems that will help you master the fundamentals of Python. So this is if you wanna get the solution to this, check the description, I have the solution. So now we'll go to problem 6. So problem 6, what we want now is to loop reversed. So loop from 100 to 1. So that's what we're gonna do, and print the values. So for I in range. So always the first one is where do we start. So now we don't start at 0 or 1 as we were doing before. We start at 100. Where do we want to go to? To 1. But it's 1 not including 1, the second argument. So we need to go one more. Okay, so remember that it's the same as doing here, I greater than 0. So I will never reach 0. It will go up to 1. So same thing here. We want it to go back to 1. And now this third argument is what are the steps we're doing? Are we going up or back? And in how many steps? So we want to go back once. So then if we print I, we're going to so problem 6, that's what we're gonna print. So we're gonna print 199, 98 all the way to 1. Sounds good? So now let's go to problem 7. Again, take a time to try these problems. You have to be able, try problem 1. Once you can do under 2 minutes, move to problem 2. Once you can go do it under 2 minutes, problem 3. So now I want you to add all the numbers from 99 to 1. All the numbers. So in the previous one, we just wanted to go from 100 to 1. Now we want to go from 99 to 1, and actually we want to add all the numbers from 99 plus 97. So we're going backwards and we're 95 all the way to 1. We're going backwards, so let's try first to go from 99 to 1. So we do for I in range 99, 1. So why 99? That's where we start. We want to go to 1, but it's not including 1. So we go 0. And then we do minus 1 because we're going, no, minus 2 now. Why minus 2? Because we're skipping 2 backwards. So let's see if we're able to do that. And I need to print problem 7. So that worked. I went from 99 to 1. So always step by step. Now I want to add them. So I need to create a variable that will keep, that I'll add the values of I to. So I can do sum equals sum plus I, or I can use the shorter version, same thing. So sum plus equals I. And then since I'm done, I want to print the sum. If I print the sum here, it's not a good idea, because if I print the sum here, look what's gonna happen. I'm gonna print every single loop. I want just the sum once the summation is over. I just want to know the value of 2500. I don't care about the rest. So that's why the indentation is important. If I put inside, if I put here, this will be inside of the for loop. If I put it back here, this is outside, so that means I've added all the values from 99 to 1 to this variable sum, and I'm done. So now let's run this. 2500. If I put a breakpoint here and I run the debugger, you're gonna see what the values of I are. So I will start at 99. Sum is 0 because I declared it here. So now my I is 99. I'm gonna add 99 to sum. And you see that the value of sum now is 99. Now my next I will be what? 97, because I do have negative 2 here. So I'm going backwards to I. 2 steps at a time. So now I'm gonna add 97 to 99, 196. Then I'm gonna go 95 plus 196. So plus equals 1, I'm adding I to sum every single iteration. Iteration means repetition. Mastering the nomenclature is important. Sounds good? Problem 7. So hopefully you guys by now are pretty familiar with loops.
Now we want to print numbers from 100 to 0 backwards using for loops. Okay, so let's print this backwards using for loop. So we already know I'm going to put this in here, range Python, okay. And when we use this range function, the range function returns a sequence of numbers starting from 0 by default and increments by 1 by default and stops before a specified number. So let's here check. When we use for, let me change here. Let me make this very clear for you. So when we do a for loop and in range 6, what is going to be the output? Here we want to print every number in this range. So we're going to see that we're printing 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're not printing the number 6. Why? Because this number here is not included, okay? So as we can see here, the stop is the position that is not included. But this start, stop, and step, this start and step, actually, they have default cases, but we can change these default cases. For example, we can change, since we want to do this backwards, we can start our for loop in the number 100, and we can stop at 0, and the step can be -1. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So for I in range, we're going to start at 100. Here the stop, we want to stop at 0, but remember that the stop, it's a not included position, so we have to put here -1, okay, and here -1, that it's this step. And we can print here what? We're going to print I. So let's check. So if we see here, we're printing numbers from 100 up to 0, okay? So what if I change here to 0? And you're going to understand, since this is a position that is not included, our for loop is going to stop at number 1, okay? So since we want to include the number 0 here, because the problem asks us, here we have to use -1, okay? Let me show you here. So that's the only way that we can show here 0, okay? Now let's go to the next problem. So print numbers from 1 to 100 using a while loop. So while loop, it's very interesting. They have the same idea as for loop, but you have to implement in a different way. So for while, we have to first initialize a variable. Okay, so since we want to print numbers from 1 to 100, we're going to initialize our I as 1. And in the while condition, we're going to set a condition that is going to handle with the while. So for example, here in the parentheses, we're going to say a condition, and while this condition is true, our while loop is going to work. When this condition become false, we're going to end the while loop, and then we're going to the next part of the problem, okay? So what is our condition here? So we want to print numbers from 1 to 100 using while loop. What we can do, we can set the condition here that we want the while loop to work we want the while loop to work while I is less than or equals to 100, okay? So while I is less than or equals to 100, what are we going to do? We're going to print I, okay? So let's check here, Python problems. Oops, so we have here a bug, right? Because we're having here a forever loop. Why this is happening? Because here we're not changing the value of I anytime. So we're going to keep in this condition forever, in this loop forever. Why? Because our I is equals to 1, and in any moment in here we are changing the value of I. So our I will be always equals to 1, and our I will always be less than or equals to 100. That's why this is a forever loop. But we don't want this, okay? I stopped this while loop. How can we do this? We can manipulate our while loop here and say that in each iteration we want to add 1 to I. So let's check. So now we have what we wanted. We're starting at 1 and we're printing numbers until 100. Okay? So now let's go to problem 4. Print the following sequence of numbers 0, 2, 4, 6, 98, 100 using a while loop. So here it's the same thing as we did before, where we were printing the numbers from 1 to 100, but now we're going to print every other number. So we're just going to print the even numbers. So here we're going to do basically the same thing as we did before, but instead of incrementing the number of I by 1 unit, we're going to increment by 2. Okay, so remember, in a while loop, we have to first initialize the variable, then we set here the condition with this variable that we already initialized. We do the command inside the while, and after we do the command, we have to change the variable that is in the condition. Why we have to change? Because if we don't change, we're going to stay in this while loop forever, and that's not what we want, okay? So since we want to print the following sequence of numbers from 0 up to 100, let's initialize our variable I equals to 100, okay? Equals to 0, because it's the first number that we want to do, okay? Now we're going to create our while. So what is going to be the condition to our while be true? So the condition is what? While I is less than 100, okay? Less or equals to 100, because we want to print the sequence of numbers from 0 up to 100. So that's what we're going to do. So while less or equals to 100. And what we're going to do inside the while, we're going to print I. And differently from what we did before, now we want to increment our number I by 2. Because we want to grab 0, 2, 4, 6, not 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in here we're going to do I plus equals 2. Okay, so let's check what happens here. I'm going to clear the terminal, Python problems.py. And as we can see here, we start from 0 and we're always adding 2. In our numbers, okay, and we are printing here. So let's just check how work in the debug 50, okay. Oops, let me clear here. I'm going to say debug 50 problems.py, and let's put a breakpoint in here on line 2. Okay, so let me run and let's check what happens. So by now our I is equal to 0, so we're going to start our while loop. So first we're going to see if we are able to enter in the while loop. So we're going to check I is equal to 0. So to enter in the while loop, this condition has to be true. So I, it's less or equal to 100. Yes, because our I has value 0. Okay, so we're going to enter in the while loop. Now we're going to print I, and what is the value of I? It's 0. And then, so we can see here in the terminal it's 0. And then what we're going to do, we're going to add 2 units to the value of I. So if we see here it's 0, now our I it's going to be equal to 2. Now we're going to check the next iteration. So now to enter in the while loop, we have to check if our I is less or equal to 100. So since our I has value 2, this is less or equal to 100. So now we're going to enter in the while loop. We're going to print I, so we're going to print 2 here, as we can see. And we're going to add 2 to the value of I. So now our 2 will become 4. Okay? So let's do one more time, just to be very clear. So we're going to check if this condition here is true. So I is less or equal to 100. Yes, because I has value 4. So we're going to enter in the condition and we're going to print the value of I. So here we're going to print 4. And now we're going to add I. We're going to add 2 to the variable
I. So now our I will have value 6. And we're going to do this all the time until we reach, let me put it here, until we reach 100. But I want to show you the last time that we did do the iteration. So let's click here to go a lot of time. So just wait a second, we're almost in the end of the while loop. So you see what's happening. It's always doing the same path, always checking the while. And remember, the compiler always do the things from top to bottom. So now we're going to the next iteration. So our I has value 100, and we're going to check. So I is less or equal to 100. Yes, I has value 100. Okay, we did a lot of iterations here. So this condition is true. We're going to enter. Now we're going to print I. So now we have 100 here. And we're going to add 2 to the value of I. So now our I will have what value? 102. And now we're going to check. So I is less than or equal to 100. No, because our I has value 102. So this condition is not true anymore. So this will make what? Our while is not going to work anymore because this condition is false. So now we finish our code. Okay? Now let's do the next problem. So print numbers from 100 to 0 backwards using a while loop. So now what we're going to do is we're going to print, instead of printing from 0 to 100, we're going to change this to 100, from 100 to 0. So how are we going to do this? So using a while loop. So remember, every time we're using a while loop, we have to initialize the value of the variable that we're going to use in the while loop. So here we're going to initialize with which variable? We want to start from 100, right? So our while will be initialized with 100. Then we're going to call our while. And what is going to be the condition for I while loop? So we want to print the numbers from 100 to 0, and we're starting at 100. So we want to say that our I has to be greater or equal to 0. So while our I has value I is greater or equal to 0, our while is true. When this becomes false, we're going to change. This while is not going to work anymore. Okay? So in here we're going to print the number, so print I. And what we're going to do with our I? Since we are going from 100 to 0, we have to decrement the value of I. So here we're going to do this. Instead of add, we're going to take out. We're going to use this this minus sign here. So minus 1. Okay? So let's see what happens. I'm going to put a breakpoint here. So debug 50 problems.py, and let's check what happens. So first our I has value 100, and now we're going to enter in the while loop. So 100 is less than or equal to 0. Yes, this condition is true. So since this condition is true, we're going to enter in the while loop, and we're going to print the value of I, that is 100. So here in the terminal, we can see 100. Now, what are we going to do? We're going to take out 1 unit from our I. So our I was 100, now it's going to be 99. Now we're going to the next iteration, so let's check this if this condition is true. This is still being true. So I is equal to 99, so 99 is greater or equal to 0. Yes, so this condition is true, and we're going to enter in the while loop. So we're going to print here 99. And we're going to take 1 unit from I. So now our I has value 98. And we're going to do this a lot of times, like we did previously. Okay, I'm going to show you all. And when we see, I'm going to run it. When we see, we are always taking out one number until when our I has value less than 0 and our while loop is not true anymore. And we stop this while loop here. Okay?
Now we're going to create a function that prints hello as many times as you want and call this function from the main. So here we're seeing that he wants us to print hello as many times as we want. So what are we going to do? We're going to create a function
Okay, and in this function, we're going to have an input that is this how many times we want to print hello. So let's see here. I'm going to erase. So remember, when we're creating functions, we have to define hello, okay? And what are we going to put inside the parentheses is the input. So this function needs an input. Yes, because we want to print how many times as we want. So I'm going to put here n, for example, that is going to be to represent the n times that I want to print hello. And here I'm going to do a for loop. So for I in range, remember range, and n inside. This n inside is saying what? You're going to do an iteration n times, and in each iteration I'm going to print hello. Okay? But it's not just this that we're going to do. Now, if we just print this, so let's see what happens. If we just put this, nothing is going to show up. Why? Because the function hello is not being called from the main. We're just defining hello, but we're not calling it from the main. If we want to see if we want to use the hello function, we have to call it from the main. So, and one more thing, everything that it's with this indentation here, so let's put here. So everything that has this indentation is inside the function hello, okay? Now that we don't have the indentation anymore, it says that we are out of this function here. So how are we going to do this? We're going to call the function, and if I don't put anything, so let's try this case. I'm not putting anything as input, but the function needs an input to work. So when we run the terminal, it's going to give us an error. Why? Because it's missing one required positional argument, that is n. So basically, the terminal explains to us when we are missing something. And in this case, we're missing a number. We have to give an input. So I'm going to put here 5, for example. So let's see. If I put here, so hello, it's calling, I'm going to call hello function, and the input is 5. So in here, our for I in range will be n equals to 5, and it's going to print hello 5 times, okay? I'm going to change now the workspace that we're using. I'm going to use the CS50 ID because I think it's better to understand what is happening in the code, okay? So just wait a second. So now let's put a breakpoint here. We are on CS50 IDE, okay? So I recommend you to do the problem in CS50 IDE. And let's put a breakpoint on line 5. Now we're going to call the debug 50 problems.py, and let's check what happens. So when we do this, we're going to open up here a debugger, okay? And we're going to check what's happening. So by now, let me close these things because we just want, oops, sorry. So here we have the breakpoint in our problem. So problems.py line 5, it's where we put our breakpoint. And by now it's showing just this hello function, value function, type function. So this line yellow in here, it's saying what? That we have a variable called hello, that it's a function. When we do a step into, we're going to enter in the hello function, and we have here n equals to 5, that is the input that we pass. When we do for I in range, what we're going to do? So here our I in the first time is going to be 0, and we're going to print hello. Now we're going to do what? We're going to do an iteration again because we didn't reach 5. So I is equals to 1, it increments the value of I by 1, and we're going to print hello again. So we're going to do an iteration again, I equals to 2. So since it's not 5, and so since I is not equals to 5, we're going to do the iteration again. So we're going to print. So we can see here we have 3 prints of hello. We're going to do an iteration again, I equals to 3. So we're going to print hello again. And we're going to do another iteration, I equals to 4, and we're going to print hello again. So now, are we going to print hello again? We have I equals to 4 and n equals to 5. So no, why not? Because let's check why not. Because remember, the number that we put here in range is not included. So we're going to always stop our I1 number before. Okay, so if we see here, we're printing hello 5 times. Okay, so now let's go to the next problem. create a function that returns the double of a number, call the function multiple times and print the result. So now we're going to create a different function. So I'm going to call def, that is definition, and I'm going to call my function as double, okay? So here we have to put, we need an input in this problem. So create a function that returns the double of a number. So yes, because we need to know which number the user wants to have the double of this number. So here we have to pass as input the number n, so we put here n. And what are we going to do? We're going to return n multiplied by 2, okay, because we want the double. If we do this in here, so if we just do Python problems.py, nothing's going to happen. Why? Because we're not calling this function anywhere. So we have to call this function. Let's call the function in the main. So here we have to do double. Let's check what happens if we do double 2. So let's print here, nothing happens. Why? Because the function has a return, it's using return here. The return, it's different from print. Return is going to give us a number, so the number n multiplied by 2 will be stored in this double 2 here, this thing here. So if we want to print, we have to call print, and we have to print inside. We're going to see this using the debugger. So debug 50 problems.py. I put a breakpoint on line 4, so let's check what happens. So here I'm calling the function double, okay, and we're going to double. So what double is going to do? We're passing n equals to 2, the value of 2 here, and we're going to return n multiplied by 2. So when we see here, we're going to say 4, okay, because this double, I'm going to put here another thing. So value, so result is equals to double 2, just for you to see this inside. So let's do the debugger again. I want you to understand what's happening in this function. Oops. Sorry, let's put the breakpoint in here. So debug 50 problems, so now it's running. What do we have? So here we're going to call the function double, and you see here we're passing n equals to 2, so this double function is going to return 2 multiplied by 2, that is 4. So if you check here, our result has value 4, and we're going to print the number of result, that is 4, okay? Now we're going to print cough in 3 ways. So let's print cough in 3 ways. So the first way that we're going to print is with using 3 print statements. So we can print, this is the first way, so cough, oops, cough, okay. So let's check here, Python problems, and we're coughing 3 times, okay? This is the first way. Now we're going to print in the second way. So what is the second way? Using a loop. So this is going to help us a lot. We can do a for I in range, and we can put 3 here because we're going to print. Remember that computers, the compiler, in programming, by convention, we always start counting at 0, okay? That's why we're going to print 3, we're going to put 3, because we're going to print at I equals to 0, I equals to 1, and I equals to 2. So then we're going to print cough. We see that this helps us a lot because it's better than writing print cough 3 times, okay? So let's do, I'm going to put a breakpoint in here, and let's check what happens. So debug 50 problems.py, and we're going to enter in this iteration. So I equals to 0. What is going to be in the first iteration? We're going to print cough. Now so we have here cough. Now we're going to the next iteration, I equals to 1, okay, and we're going to print cough again. Now we're going to the next iteration, I equals to 2, then we're going to print cough again. Are we going to do a next iteration, I equals to 3? No, because remember, in the range function, 3, the number that we put here, the stop, is not included, so we're always going to stop in one number before. So if you can see here, nothing happens, and we're done with this problem, okay? And now we're going to print cough using a function. So let's create a function. So I'm going to call definition cough. The name of the function will be cough. And I'm going to put here inside what? I'm going to print how many times as I want. So I'm going to print here as input n, okay? And I'm going to do for I in range n. And we're going to print cough n times. It's like to say hello n times. So now we have to call the cough, okay? So cough, and I'm going to put here 3. And when we check, oops, I have to put a breakpoint in here. So clear, let's see what happens. So debug 50, the cough is going to call the cough function here, and we have n equals to 3. Now we're going to do for I in range. So I, what's the value of the first I? It's 0, okay? So 0, I equals to 0, we're going to print cough 1 time. Now we're going to the next iteration, I equals to 1. So we're going to print cough again. Now we're going to the next iteration, yes, I equals to 2. So we're going to print cough 1 more time. And I ask you, are we going to go to the next iteration? I equals to 2 and our stop in the range is equals to 3. No, right? Because remember the number that we put here in the stop is not included. So this for loop is not going to work and we're going to stop the code, okay? Now let's go to the next problem. Ask user for integer input, which will be our change. Use a while loop to determine how many quarters will be given as change. Example, 76 as changes uses 3 quarters. 25 as change uses 1 quarter. So quarter, it's the value of 25, okay? So we're going to do this. So first, let's ask user for integer input, which will be our change. So we're going to, since we're going to ask user for an input, we have to call the library CS50 and import the get int, right? Now what are we going to do? We're going to ask user, so we're going to use chain x is equals to get int x. Okay, so we're going to grab the value from the user. And now we have to use a while loop to determine how many quarters will be given as change. So how are we going to do this? So while loop. So we're going to do a while loop, and what is going to be our condition? So we can do this like what? We want to know how many quarters we're going to give as change. So we can do this change to be while our x is greater or equal to 25, we're going to keep doing this. Why 25? Because 25 is the value of 1 quarter. And when we have a value less than 25, we cannot use a quarter as change. So for example, so quarter, I'm going to comment this out here. So quarter has value 25. And we just can give a change using quarter if the value is greater, if the x is greater than 25. Our change has, so here the case, our x needs to have value more greater or equal to 25, because this is the only way that we can give a quarter as change. So this is what we're going to do. So while x is greater or equal to 25, we're going to do something inside. And what is going to be this something inside? We're going to get our number here and we're going to take out 25, okay? And after all, and we have to know how many quarters are we giving to as change. So we have to create a variable here to count quarters. Here we're going to initialize at 0, and in each iteration we're going to increment this count quarters plus equals 1. And after all, we're going to print count quarters, okay? So let's see what happens here. I know it's confusing, but you're going to get the idea. I'm going to put a breakpoint there. So debug 50 problems.py. I'm going to pass 76 because we already know here in the problem that we want 3 quarters as change. So here we're going to see that 76 is our x, okay? And we're going to create our count quarters. So our count quarters, I
I have a little bit of problems of saying these quarters. I can't say this yet, you already know. So we have count quarters equals to 0. And now we're going to enter in the while loop and we're going to check this condition. So 76 is greater or equal to 25. Yes, so since this condition is true, we're going to enter in the while loop. And in this case, we're going to take out 25 from 76. So now our x is going to change by 51. And we're going to increment our count quarters because we want to know how many quarters we're going to give as change. So our count quarters will be 1, okay? Now we're going to check this while condition. So 51 is greater or equal to 25. Yeah, so since this condition is true, we're going to keep in the while loop and we're going to take out 25 from 51. So we have here 26. And we're going to increment our counter. So we're going to have here 2. Now we're going to check. So 26 is greater or equal to 25. Yes, this condition is true. So we're going to enter in the while loop and we're going to do 26 minus 25 and our x now is 1. Okay? And we're going to increment our counter. So now our counter has value 3. Now we're going to check. 1 is greater or equal to 25. No, this condition is false, so this while loop is not going to happen, and we're going to print how many quarters. Okay, it's for some reason. Let me see. So here we have 3. Okay, that is what was expected.
So let's do problem 15. Keep asking a user for a positive value. This loop should break. Look up the break keyword in double-3 schools when the user input is positive. Keep looping until the user inputs a positive value. So here we're going to do a while loop, okay? And we're going to keep asking the user for a positive value. And if the user gave us a positive value, we're going to get out of this while loop. So let's see the word break in double-3 schools as the problem recommends. So the break keyword is used to break out a for loop or a while loop. So basically, let's see this example here. We have a while loop, so I less than 9, and we're going to print the values of I. If I is equal to 3, we're going to break, and then we're going to keep adding here. So if we take a look, we just printed 1, 2, and 3. And why? Because when we reach I equals to 3, we break the while loop, and that's it, okay? So we're going to basically do this. In this case, so we have to, so first, since we are we're going to keep asking user for a positive value, we have to use the getInt. So from CS50 import getInt function, okay? And we're going to do a while loop. So here we're going to do a while true. So this means that it's kind of a infinite loop because this condition will never be false, right? Because we're saying while true. And how can we break this while loop? We're going to use the break word, okay? So we're going to say, so x equals to getInt, we're going to keep asking, so positive value. So here we are asking the user for a positive value, and we have to check after that if the user gave us a number that is greater or equal to 0, because this is how a positive value is. If the user gives us a positive value, we're going to break, okay? And after that, we're going to print x just to see if it's working. So let's see, Python problem 15.py, and for example, oops, so this is not working. Why is that? Oh, sorry, I have to put if. I'm so sorry, I forgot. So if x blah blah blah. So let's run this again. And Python problem 15.py. So here positive value, I'm going to give -5. So it's asking us again, okay? And it's going to keep asking until we give a positive value and stops. So let's see what happens when we use the breakpoint. So debug 50 problem 15.py, and let's see what happens. So let's wait a second. And we're going to see here the debug 50, and it's saying what? So here getInt, so let's just keep step over, and I'm going to give up a negative value, so minus 5. Here, if you take a look, we're checking this condition. So if x is greater or equal to 0, is this condition going to be satisfied? No, because our x is less than 0, right? It's minus 5. So we're going to line 7, we're going to ask again the user. So step over, now I'm going to give a positive value. And let's see what happens. So if I put here 10, for example, and click, now it's going to, we're going to check this condition. So 10 is greater or equal to 0. Yes, 10 is a positive value. So we're going to enter in this if condition, and we're going to be here in this break. So this break is going to get us out of this while loop. And the next line is line 10, where we're going to print 10. Okay, where we're going to print 10. Okay?
Without further ado, let's get started with problem 1. So problem1.py. So we'll start pretty simple. So I want you guys to try to add numbers from 1 to 10. Okay? But before doing that, let's do problem 1. I want you guys to use Python 3 for loops in 3 different ways. Okay, so the first one, I want you guys to do a for each loop. So for each loop. So basically, if you guys don't know what a for each loop, so I'll have a list here. So let's call this list X. X will have 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's make other numbers. 10, 9, 5, 3, 2. What we want is to loop over the values of this list without using range, just looping through these values directly. Then I want you to loop through the list indexes. So the index of 10 is what? 0. The index of 9 is what? 1. The index of 5 is what? 2. So I want you to show the indexes of all of those values. Finally, I want you to loop through the values of the list using the index. So now that you've looped through the index of this list in the second item here, I want you to say, okay, I'm gonna loop through this using range now. So I is equal 0 is 10, I equals 1 is 9. So using the index, we're gonna print the value directly. So stop the video and try this. Okay, so if you tried, let's do a for each. So for, and here I can name anything. So for val in X, print val. So let's save and run this. Okay, so let's run this. So I'm gonna do Python 3, problem 1, and it prints 10, 9, 5, 3, 2. So that's one way of printing values in Python. So memorize that. Another way of printing values in Python is doing a for, looping through the indexes. So we'll do for I in range. Observe the variable name doesn't matter. I can call this Y. Just don't name it X, because X is the name of the list. Name it Y, name it anything. Okay? So now if I want to loop through the indexes, so 0, 1, all the way to the last index, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, I use length of the list, because that will start at 0 all the way to the length, but this, since this is not inclusive, so it doesn't actually go up to length of X, it goes up to length of X minus 1. We use length X. Let me show what I mean. So I'll comment this out just so you guys are not confused. So let me print this. and now you get 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So now it's not the values of the list 10, 9, 5, 3, and 2, but the indexes. However, using the index, I can grab the value. So I can say x square bracket 0, that gives me 10. X square brackets 1 gives me 9. So I can use the index, so for I in range length x, so similar to what we had before, but I'm gonna print now each value using square brackets. So I starts at 0, so x0 will be 10. Then I will be 1, x1 equals 9, I equals 2, so on and so forth. So let's print this. I'm gonna comment this out. Okay, so we're printing this using square brackets. If we print this, we get 10, 9, 5, 3. Observe this way of for loop is the same as this one up here. It's just a different way. Okay, so I hope you guys memorize this, because this is done over and over again. You might see other ways of looping, but those are the main ones you need to know 100%. Okay, so this is problem 1, create. So the problem is create a list, and then you want to loop through the list using a for each, for index, let's call this for index, and a for value, so a for loop value with index. So 3 different ways, all of that under 2 minutes. I believe memorizing is not always bad, especially this like foundational stuff. So I actually use the debugger here because I think it really helps you guys understand. So I'll put a breakpoint here and you guys can see what's gonna happen. So let's wait for the debugger to start. So now it stopped here. This is my array X. If I step, you see that my val is 10. So at every iteration, and then I'm gonna print 10. Observe the terminal here. It's gonna show 10. Now val will be 9, which is the next one. Now it's gonna be 5, so on and so forth. Now if we go here, you guys will see that I now is not printing the values themselves, but it's printing the indexes. So it's gonna print 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, the indexes. We can grab specifically values using the index. So that's what we'll do here in this loop through the values of the array using indexes. So we go 10, 9. So those are the values, but I'm using the indexes. Okay, so I'm assuming here you guys already have a familiarity with basics. I'm just going through some classic problems.
Now let's go to the next problem. So write a program to check if 2 integers have the same last digit. So how can we do this? This is an interesting thing to do, because now we're going to use some tricks from math. Okay, so here we're going to do what first? We're going to ask user for 2 integer inputs. So from CS50 import get int. And what are we going to do? We're going to ask user for 2 inputs. So remember, x is equal to get int x. Oops, I forget the double quotation marks. Y is equal to get int y. And now we're going to create a function that is going to be called last digit, okay? Because we want to check the last digit. So def last digit
This is the name that I want to give to my function, and we have as input 2 values. Okay, and what are we going to do? There is something in mathematics that it's called module. So not module, sorry, it's the remainder. I'm going to show you here. So remainder. So in a division, we always have, when we do a division of 2 numbers, so for example, when we do 11 divided by 10, we have always as value 1. But what is the remainder of this operation here? It's 1, right? It's because 10 multiplied by 1 is 10, and we have left the value of 1. It's the same thing as if we have here 5, for example. 15 divided by 10 has value 1, and we have as remainder the number 5. Okay, and how can we get the remainder? The percent symbol in Python is called the module operator. It returns the remainder of dividing the left-hand operand by right-hand operand. It's used to get the remainder of a division problem. So so how are we going to get the last digit? The remainder. If you take a look, the division 10 by 15 has value 1, and the remainder is 5. And what is the last digit? It's also 5. So we're going to use the remainder here, okay? So we're going to do what? We're going to do return x remainder by 10. And we're going to check, actually I'm going to say, put here, last x is equals to x remainder of 10, and last y has value y remainder of 10. Okay, so but remember the previous problem that it's always good to use with the absolute value. So I'm going to put here abs, because for example, if we have minus 15 and 15, it's not going to return they have the same last digit because we have the minus. So since we want to avoid the problem with positive and negative values, we're going to use the absolute value. Okay, and what are we going to return? We want to see if they have the same last digit. So we're going to check if last x is equals to last y, we're going to return true, and else we're going to return false. Okay, so remember we have to call our last digit function in here, and let's see what happens. So clear, I'm going to put a breakpoint in here, and let's check. It's one more powerful tool, this module. It's confusing at the beginning, but you're going to see this will help you a lot. So let's put here 16 and 96, for example. So we're passing here. So what is the last digit of 16? How are we going to grab the last digit? So we're going to do the remainder. So the 16 divided by 10 has value 1. And what is the remainder of 16 divided by 10? It's 6, right? So we're going to print in last x the value of 6. What is the remainder of 96 divided by 10? It's also 6, right? So we have here last y equals to 6. Now we're going to check if they have the same last digit. So since last x is equal to 6 and last y is equal to 6, we're going to return true. Okay? Now if we change the problem for another number, so let's check here. I'm going to put 5 and 8, for example. So we're going to check here what is the when we do 5 divided by 10, what is the remainder? It's 5, right? So last x is equal to 5. 8 divided by 10 has remainder of what? It's 8, right? So we have here last y. And now we're going to check. So 5 is equal to 8. No, so we're going to return false. Okay. Now we're going to do one more two problems in here. Write a program to compute the sum of the two integers. If the sum is in the range of 10 and 20 inclusive, return 30. So here is the same thing. We have to call we're going to ask from user two integer inputs. So remember, from CS50 import get int, and we're going to ask user two integers. So x is equals to get int x, y is equals to get int y. And now we're going to write a function that it's going to do this for us. So we're going to compute the sum of two integers. If the sum is in the range of 10 and 20 inclusive, return 30. So we're going to do this. We're going to define here check nums, okay, x and y as input. And what are we going to do? So we're going to check the sum. So we're going to see sum is equals to x plus y, okay, and we're going to check if the sum is in the range of 10 and 20 inclusive, because if there is, we're going to return 30, else we're just going to return the sum. So that's what we're going to do. So if sum is greater or equal to 10 and sum is less than or equal to 20, we're going to return 30, else we're going to return sum, okay. So let's see how it goes. And remember, we have to call the function in the main function. So print check nums x and y. So let's put a breakpoint in here and see what is happening. So debug 50 problems.py, and what are we going to do is what? So here I'm going to put 6 and 6. So our sum will be what? 6 plus 6 is 12. And now we're going to check. So 12 is greater than 10. Yes. And so this two condition has to be satisfied. And 12 is less than or equal to 20. Yes. So we're going to return 30. Okay. Let's do this in a different example. So if I put here 1 and 1, so we're going to check. So our sum will be 2. Okay. So now are we going to check? So 2 is less than, it's greater or equal to 10? No, so since this condition is not satisfied, the other doesn't matter because this if condition is not satisfied. So we're going to return true, okay? Now let's write a program that accepts two integers and return true if either one is 5 or their sum or difference is 5. So it's basically the same idea here, okay? But let's do this from scratch. So we're going to ask from the user two inputs. So remember, from CS50 import get int, and we're going to ask user for two inputs. And what are we going to do? We're going to do x is equal to get int x, y is equal to get int y. And now we're going to create this function. So I'm going to do this def, and the name of the function will be test, and I'm going to pass x and y. And when are we going to return true? Look at this condition. So if x is equal to 5, or y is equal to 5, or x plus y is equal to 5, or x minus y is equal to 5. Okay, so this is the condition. So x is equal to 5, or y is equal to 5, or x plus y is equal to 5, or since we're going to use a difference here, it's always good to use the absolute value. So x minus y is equal to 5. These four conditions, if one of them is true, we're going to return true, okay? And then the else, we're going to return false. So now we have to call the function, okay? So I'm going to call it in here. So print test xy, and let's put a breakpoint in here. So clear debug 50. So I'm going to put 5 and 1. So now we're going to check. We have x equals to 5 and y equals to 1. So x is equal to 5. Yes, so this if condition is satisfied, and we return true. Why we just check 1? Because we're using OR. So one of these conditions has to be satisfied to
this if condition be true. Okay, so now let's do this again. So I'm going to put 1 and 5, and now x is equal to 1 and y is equal to 5. So x is equal to 5? No, it's equal to 1. Okay, y is equal to 5? Yes, so we're going to return true. Now let's check one more example. So if we have 3 and 2, so x is equal to 3, it's not equal to 5, so this condition is not satisfied. Y is equal to 2, so it's not equal to 5, so this condition is not satisfied. X plus y is 3 plus 2, so we have 5, so 5 is equal to 5, so this condition is satisfied. And this same thing happens with the x minus y. So let's see here. So if we put 6, 1, what do we have? So we know that 6 minus 1 it has value 5, so this if condition is satisfied. Okay, and the other conditions we're just going to enter in the false. So if we do here Python problems, if I put 1 and 2, it's going to return false. Okay,
let's use this while loop thing to count the number of digits. So I want to count the number of digits of a number. So let's create a number. So num equals 3. Just render. So how many digits we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 digits. So one cool trick that I want you guys to know is that we can delete what is in Python. As you probably know by now, we have 2 ways to divide. We can do just 1 / like that, so that gives us a decimal point. But if we divide with 2 / it deletes the decimal point. If we want to remove the last digit, a trick we can do is to divide by 10. So if I want to remove 3, I divide by 10 using the 2 / and that gets equal to only 2, because remember that this 2 / ignores the decimal point. So what I can do is to count the number of digits, I need a counter to count the number of digits. So let's see, if I do, let me create here on the terminal a value called 23. If I do 23, num equals num divided by 10, now num equals 2. If I divide num by 10 again, I get what? Num is 0, because 2 divided by 10, ignoring the decimal points, is 0. The great thing here is that we can count the number of digits using that property. So while my num is greater than 0, we're going to divide num by 10 and increment our counter. So we're counting how many digits we have. So my problem is create an integer counter, and we're gonna count the number of digits. And this is a good example of why while loops have their place, because here we don't know how many times we are gonna we're going to loop on num, because we don't know yet how many digits it has. So we basically have this condition. So let's actually put a breakpoint, because this might be confusing to some of you. So let me create let's create a debugging session, and we'll see what the values are. So my counter starts at 0, my num will be this value. Okay, so now let's see what happens. So when I do num, remember this is chopping off the divided by 10, we remove the last digit. So now we got that value num without the last digit. And since we remove 1 digit, we increment counter by 1. Now we divide, is num greater than 10? Yes. So we divide it by 10, observe we chop off another digit, the last one, and we increment counter. So now we're gonna chop off the 2, okay? And we're gonna increment counter. So let's keep on doing that, and you see the counter increases, keeps on increasing. So we keep on going, keep on counting. So now we're at 7, 2, and counter will be 9, which is the total number of digits. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So just to make sure everything. So that's it, guys. So this is one very cool way of using counter. So let's run this. Oops, I ran the wrong one. So this is problem 25. And we print 9, which is the number of digits. Okay, so while loop, very important. Make sure you guys understand this. Try to do the problem under 2 minutes. So now we'll go up to problem 30. So problem 26. Let's say I wanted to create a long digit number, and I wanted to grab the first 2 digits. So this is a cool problem because, again, we can use divided by 10. So if I want to, so let's create a random value, blah, blah, blah. If I want to grab the first 2 digits, that's 33, right? We just learned that if I divide this number by 10, I chop off the last 4. So that would be equals to that. Now, if I divided this by 100, I chop off the last 2 digits. If I divide this by 1,000, the last 3 by 10,000, all of this. So I get only 33 remaining. So this is really cool because I can grab a value like let's create this just random values here. And what are the last 2 digits? So the last 2 digits, so I can use a power. I'll show you 2 ways of doing this. So I can do print num. So how many digits I want to chop off? I want to chop off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if I divide this by 10, so 10 with 6 zeros, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That will give me 23, which are the first 2 digits. Let me change this to problem 26. 23. But there is an easier way. So in Python, there is a function called poll, which you can put the number of digits of 0 you want. So this is power. So I want 6 zeros. So I say poll 10, 6. So this, instead of just putting a bunch of zeros, I can use poll. So that's a way I can get the first 2 digits of a number. Okay?
So now let's do problem 46. Create the following pattern. So the following pattern has one star in the first line, 2 stars in the second line, 3 stars in the third line, and 4 stars in the fourth line. So basically here we're going to work with nested for loops, where we're basically going to have a for loop that is going to manipulate the rows and a for loop that is going to manipulate the columns, okay? So for this, first of all, we have to ask the user for how many rows the user wants for our pattern here. So we have to add the CS50 getInt function, okay? So from CS50 import getInt, and we're going to ask the user how many rows. So num rows, it's equals to getInt, and here we're going to say number of rows, okay? And after that, we're going to work with nested for loops, okay? So the outer for loop is going to handle the rows. So here we can say for row in range, and here we're going to do the row in range from 1 up to number of rows that the user gave to us, okay? And why we're starting at 1? Because let's think that if we start at 0, we would have one like this, we would have this pattern, one row that wouldn't have any star being printed. So that's why we have to start at 1, because we're going to start like the first row already having a first star. Okay, so if we put this way, we can do, this is going to manipulate the rows, and now we have to have a for loop that is going to manipulate the column. So here we're going to see for column in range, and here how can we manipulate the column to be a nested for loop for the row? So here we're going to set that the limit of our range will be row plus 1. Okay, so 1 row plus 1. And what are we going to do? So in this inner for loop, we're going to print the star, okay, because the inner for loop is handling about the columns, and the columns are printing the stars. And when we get out of the inner for loop, now we are out of the inner for loop, we're just inside the outer for loop. The outer for loop is handling about the rows. So how can we change rows? We can use print, and we're going to print a new row, okay? We're going to kind of jump the line, basically. So let's see what happens in here. It's going to give a bug, but I wanted to understand why, okay? So Python problem 46.py, and I'm going to put here 4. And if we take a look, they're not printing the same line. And why is that? Because when we use print, the print basically always go to the next line. So to handle this, we have to use this and equals to quotation marks. So this means that everything inside this inner for loop is going to be printed in the same row. Okay, so let's see what happens. So Python problem blah blah 4, and by now we're just printing 3. So how can we handle this? We want 4 rows, but we're just printing 3. So we're going to add here plus 1. Okay, since we're not using from 0, we have to add here plus 1. So clear, let's run this again. 4, and if you take a look, now it's happening the pattern that we want. So let's use the breakpoint and see how it happens using the debugger. So debug 50, debug 50, problem 46.py, and let's understand what is happening in our code, okay? It's kind of hard, but I think you're going to understand. So let's use here 4. So now we have here number of rows is 4, and we're going to do an iteration from 1 up to 5, okay? Because rows is 4, and here we want to do 5. So for row in range, we are creating the row variable here, and our first value of row will be 1, okay? And now we're going to create our column variable, that the first value will be 1, because we're setting here that the start is 1, and the end is row plus 1. So since row is 1, so here we're going to have the limit of 2. So now we're going to enter in this for loop, and the first thing we're going to do in this for loop is going to print the star. Okay, so we're going to print the first star here. And you see the end is putting the cursor on the terminal here right next to the star. It's not going to the next line, because normally print always go to the next line. But when we use this end here, it's going to let all in the same line here. Now it's going to check if we're going to do a next iteration. So since our limit is here is row plus 1, so since row is 1, row plus 1 is 2. So our limit is 2. But remember, the range functions always start one number before the limit that we put in here. So we're going to get out of this for loop, in this inner for loop, and now we're going to jump one line. So if we take a look here, now we are in the next line, okay? Now we're going to do this next for loop of the row. So now our row will change value to 2, as we can see in here. As we can see here, row equals to 2. And now we're going to enter again in the inner for loop. So now we're going to handle with the column. So the first value of column will be 1, okay? And now if you take a look, column equals to 1. And now we're going to print the first star. Now we're going to check if we're going to keep on this for loop. So since the limit here is 3, because row is 2 plus 1 is 3, so we're going to do one more iteration. So now column has value 2, and we're going to print a second star in the same line of the previous print that we've done. So now we have a second star. Now, are we going to keep on this for loop? No, because the limit here is 3 and our column already has value 2. So now we're going to print to go to the next line, and we're going to start another iteration in the row for loop, okay? So now we're going to change the value of row to 3, and we're going to initialize again this inner for loop. So our column will start at value 1, and here, okay, value 1, and we're going to print the first star. Now we're going to change the value of row to 2, and we're going to print a second star in the same line, okay, because we're using this AND here. And now we're going to print another star, and if you take a look here in the same line, we're going to print another star. And now, are we going to keep in this for loop? No, because here our limit, since row is 3, our limit is 4, and our column already has value 3. And remember, the range we always stop in one position before. So we're going to line 14, and we're going to print to go to a next line, as we can see in here. And now we're going to do our last iteration, right? Because number of rows is 4, and our row in here, so the limit is 5. And our rows now will have value 4, so it's our last iteration. And now we're going to initialize again our inner for loop that handles with column. So now we're going to start column equals to 1, and we're going to print the first star. Then we're going to change the value of column to 2, and we're going to print the second star in the same line. Now we're going to change the value of column to 3, and we're going to print a star again in the same line. Change the value of column for 4, and we're going to print in the same line again. And now we're not going to do a next iteration because we reached the stop position, okay? And we're going to print to go to the next line. And now we're going to get out of this outer for loop because we reached the limit here, and that's it, okay? Now let's work with problem 47. So if you see, it's the same problem that we faced with the stars in the previous problem, but now we're going to use numbers. So we're going to do the same structure. So from CS50 import get int to get the input from the user. So number of rows, it's equals to get int, so rows, and the user is going to give to us. And now we're going to do an outer for loop that is going to handle with the row in range I num rows plus 1, actually it's 1 as I said, and inside we're going to do a for loop that is going to handle with the column. So for column in range 1 and row plus 1. So the row here, it's getting from the outer for loop. And in here we're going to print. So now we have to think what we're going to print, okay? Before we were printing the number of, we were printing stars, but now we want to print 1 in the first line, 2 in the second line, 3 in the third line, and 4 in the fourth line. So basically, if you take a look, the numbers that are in here are the numbers of the respective rows. So in the first line we have 1, in the second line we have 2, in the third line we have 3, the number 3 being printed, okay? And in the fourth line we have the number 4 being printed. So here, instead of creating a new variable, we can just use the row variable to print in here. And remember, we have to use the AND, okay, so we don't go to the next line. And after this inner for loop, we have to print to go to a new line, okay, because the row for loop is handling this. So let's take a look at what happens here. So let me clear and put a breakpoint in here, and we're going to use debug 50 problem 47. And let's see what happens, okay? So here I'm going to print 3. So we want 3 rows. So our for loop here is going to start at number 1, and we're going to do this for loop until number 3, okay? Now we're going to enter in this for loop, so row is equals to 1, and we're going to initialize our column here. So in range, we're going to start our column at 1, okay? And now we're going to print row. So row is number 1, so we're going to print number 1 in here. Are we going to have a next iteration? No, because remember the range stops at the position before of the number that is in here. Since row it's 1, so here it's 2, so we're going to stop at number 1. Okay, since column is already 1, we're going to line 14 and we're going to print to go to the next line. Here we're going to do this again, so we're going to change the value of row by 1, and now we have row equals to 2, and we're going to start our inner for loop of column. So first value of column will be 1, and we're going to print the value of row. So what is the value of row? It's 2, so we're going to print the number 2, and we're not changing the value of row, that's why we can use this in here. Okay, we're just changing the value of column here inside this inner for loop. So here we're going to the next iteration, okay, and we're going to print again the number of row, that is still 2. So we have 2. Since we're not going to do anything else in this for loop because we reached the limit, we're going to line 14 and we're going to print to go to the next line. And this happens again with the third, with row equals to 3. We're going to start again our column and we're going to print the value of row, that is 3. Okay, so this is basically it, and we're done with the problem. Okay, so you can use the value of row because the value of row kind of is this respective number that it's printed in its row. Okay, so now in this problem here we're going to use again the same structure we did before, but now we're going to print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So now we have to create a new variable, okay, to handle with the numbers that it's going to be printed. So let's start our problem. So we have to import from CS50, import get int num rows. It's the same structure we did before, get int. So rows, and we're going to do our for loop. So for, let me take this out. So for row in range of 1 and rows plus 1, for column in range 1 row plus 1, we're going to print something, okay, and after all we're going to print to go to the next line. Now we have to think what we're going to print in here. So I suggest that you create a new variable. Okay, so we're going to create a variable called k. So k equals to 1 to print the first number here. And we're going to print k in here. Okay, remember to use the and. But we have to change the value of k, otherwise we're just going to print k equals to 1. So to change the value of k, we can do k plus equals 1. So in every iteration, we're going to change the value of k. Okay, so let's see what happens. Let me put a breakpoint here on line 12, so clear. And we're going to use debug 50, 48. And let's see what happens. Let me make this larger, so Ctrl C. Let me call debugger again. And here the number of rows, I'm going to put 3. And so k now it's equals to 1, and we're going to start our for loop. So we're going to initialize row equals to 1, and we're going to start our inner for loop that is going to handle with the columns. So column equals to 1 also. Here we're going to print the value of k. So what is the value of k? Is 1 by now, okay? So we're going to print 1, and now we're going to change the value of k by 1. So now our k has value 2, okay? Are we going to do a next iteration in here? No, because we reached the stop position, right? So now we're going to line 16 and we're going to print to go to the next line. So go to the next line, and now we're going to increment the value of row to 2. So now we have row equals to 2, and we're going to start our column for loop in here. So column equals to 1, we're going to print the value of k. What is the value of k by now? It's 2, right? Because we already changed it, so we're going to print 2, and now we're going to change the value of k by 1. Now k is equal to 3. Next iteration in this column for loop, we're going to print the value of k, that now is 3. Okay, here we can see 3. And we're going to change the value of k by 1, so now our k has value 4. We're not going to do this iteration anymore because we already reached this top position, so we're going to line 16 and we're going to print to go to the next line. Are we going to do this iteration again? Yes, because here our stop position is 4 and our row has value 2, so we're going to do one more iteration. So we're going to enter again in the inner for loop of the column. Okay, so column equals to 1. We're going to print the value of k, that now is 4, and now we're going to change the value of k by 1. So k has value 5 now. We're going to change the value of column. So now we're going to change by 1. And we're going to print the value of k, that is 5. So here if you take a look, it's 5. And now we're going to change the value of k by 1. So if you take a look, k is equal to 6 now. In this for loop, we're going to change the value of column by 1 again. So column equals to 3. And we're going to print the value of k, that is 6. So if we take a look here, now we're printing 6. And we're going to change the value of k by 1. So now k has value 7. We're not going to do this inner for loop again because we reached this top position. So we're going to line 16. We're going to print to go to the next line. And we're not going to do anything else in this outer for loop because we reached this top position as well. So this way we are getting out of our code. Okay?
Now let's see this. Ask user for an integer, call a function that sums the digits in this integer and print the result. So here we're going to first work with this ask user for an integer. So remember we have to import getInt from CS50 library. Import getInt, okay. And we're going to ask user for an integer. So here we're going to say x is equals to getInt, and we're going to say x colon, okay. Now we're going to create a function to make this works better, okay? So here we're going to say create function, okay? And now our function will be defined. So I'm going to say get some digits because we want to get the sum of the digits in this integer. So here we have to pass this x because it's the integer that we grabbed from the user. And how are we going to do this to work? So since we want to get the sum of the digits, we have to initialize a variable equals to sum. And we're going to use a while loop. So what will be the condition that is going to work, that is going to set our condition as true to enter in the while loop? So we're going to do while x is different than 0. And you're going to understand why. So while x is different than 0, we're going to do this condition, okay? So we're going to sum what? We want to sum the last digit in each iteration. So remember that in the beginning of this video that we grab the last digit, we have the last digit function. So we're going to do this the same. We're going to use the remainder to get the last digit. So we're going to do x remainder, x divided by 10, we're going to grab the remainder using this operator. So okay, now we have to change the value of x, because if we don't do this, this while will be a while loop forever. So how are we going to do this? So in each iteration we're going to take out this last digit using this double forward slash here, because this double forward slash, it's a division, it's an integer division. Okay, I'm going to show you what is an integer division. So let me show you what is an integer division. So for example, if we have here 10, so let's print 10 1 divided by 2, and then we're going to print 1 divided by 2 in a different way. This is a floating point division, so we're going to have some value, and this is an integer division. So let's check the difference. We're going to do these Python problems. So when we use just one forward slash as a division, we're going to receive a floating point as a result, and when we use a double forward slash, we're going to receive as value an integer value. Okay, so for example, we can change this here. So when we use just one forward slash, we're going to receive a
a decimal number, and when we use two forward slashes, we're going to receive an integer, okay? So in this case, what we want to do, we want to do an integer division, okay? Because we're setting here that x is different than 0. So here we're going to do this, and after all, we're going to return the sum. And we have to call this get sum digits, and we're going to pass our x from the user as input. So let's see what happens. I'm going to put here a breakpoint, so debug 50 problems.py, and let's see what happens. So I'm going to pass here 1, 2, 3, okay? And so here we have x equals to 1, 2, 3. We're going to get now sum equals to 0, and we're going to do a while loop. So while x is different than 0, so now our x is 1, 2, 3, so this condition is satisfied. Yes, because 123 it's different than 0. So we're going to enter in this while loop, and we're going to do the sum. So the sum will do what? We're going to grab the last digit of 123. So what's the value of our sum at the end of this line? When we click here step into, we're going to have 3 because we're grabbing the last digit. And now we're going to change the value of x for the next iteration. So x integer division by 10, we're going to have 12. Okay? So now our x has value 12. Now we're going to check. So 12 is different than 0. Yes, so this while loop is satisfied, and we're going to get here the sum, the last digit. So what is the 12 divided by 10 has a remainder of what? 2, right? So we're going to add 2 to our sum that has value 3, and now it will become 5. So now we have to divide x, an integer division, by 10. So 12 divided by 10 will have 1. Okay, so 1 is different than 0. Yes, so this while is satisfied, this while condition is satisfied. And now we're going to divide 1 by 10, and we're going to get the remainder. What's the remainder? 1. So here we have sum equals to 6 because we add 1 in 5. And now we're going to divide x in an integer division by 10. And now our x is 0. So now we're going to check. So 0 is different than 0. No, so this while it's not satisfied, and we're going to return the sum, okay? So now let's do the last problem, problem 53. So here basically we want to create a function that sums every other digit. So let's start creating this function. So def sum every other digit, and we're going to receive as parameter number x, okay? We're going to create a variable that it's going to be is alternate digit. Okay, this is a variable we're creating to check if it's an alternate digit or not. So we're going to initialize as false, and we're going to create a variable sum because we want to sum every other digit. Okay, now we're going to do a while. So here it's kind of the same way as we did before. So while x is greater than 0, we're going to check. Now, this is the part that is different. We're not going to sum every digit. We're going to sum every other digit. So here we have to check if it's an alternate digit or not, okay? So we're going to do this condition. So if is alternate digit, we're going to sum if it is, okay? So if alternate digit is true, we're going to sum the last digit using the remainder here. And outside this sum, we're going to change the status of is alternate digit. So in every iteration, we have to change this alternate digit to true or false. Okay, so is alternate digit is going to be equals to, here, how can we change? We're going to use the not syntax here that changed false to true and true to false. Okay, so not is alternate digit. So here, the new value of is alternate digit is not going to be the last value of alternate digit, okay? That's how we switch. And we have to change the value of x dividing it by 10, okay? And after all, in this function, we're going to return the sum. So here, we're going to ask the user for a number, so num equals to get int number, and we're going to print the function sum every other digit, passing the num as the number. Since we're using getInt here, we have to use the CS50 ID. Okay, so from CS50 import getInt, and now we're good to go. Okay, so let's put a breakpoint here on line 6 and let's check what happens. So debug 50 problem 53.py, and let's see what happens. So basically I'm going to pass the number 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, and let's see what happens. So we have here x equals to 1, 2, 3, 4 because we call the function here and we enter in the function that sum every other digit, and we're initializing the variable is alternate digit to false. Okay, so here false, and we're going to initialize our sum as 0. So here we have sum equals to 0. And now we're going to check this while loop. So while x is greater than 0, so are we going to enter in this while loop? Yes, because our x is 1234. So we're going to enter in this while loop and we're going to check if alternate digit is true. So this condition is going to be satisfied? No, because this alternate digit is false. So we're going to line 11. And here we're going to change the value of is alternate digit. So since it's false, when we do not false, the is alternate digit is going to become true, okay? And here we're going to divide the value of x by 10. So if we take a look here, we have 123. So are we going to keep in this while loop? Yes, because x is greater than 0. So we're going to check if is alternate digit is true. So this condition is satisfied because this alternate digit is indeed true. And we're going to sum the last digit of x. That is going to be 3. So our sum now will have value 3. Now we have to change the value of is alternate digit. So what is not true is false, right? So is alternate digit is going to become false. And now we're going to divide the value of x by 10. So here we have 12. So here we have to check. So are we going to keep in this while loop? Yes, because 12 is greater than 0. And now we're going to check this condition. So is alternate digit true? No, because this alternate digit is false. So we're not going to enter in this if. And now we're going to change the value of is alternate digit. So what is not false? It's true, right? So is alternate digit will become true, as we can see in here. Now we're going to change the value of x by dividing by 10. So it's 12, now it's going to become 1. So 1 is greater than 0, yes, so we're going to keep in this while loop. If is alternate digit equals to true, so since is alternate digit is true, we're going to enter in this if condition, and we're going to sum the last digit. So here we have sum equals to 4. Now we're going to change the value of is alternate to not true, so not true will become false. And we're going to divide the value of x by 10. So since x is 1, now x has value 0. So are we going to keep in this while loop? No, because now x has value 0 and 0 is not greater than 0. So we're going to line 13 and we're going to return sum. And when we return sum, we're going to print the value of sum in here, okay?
So now let's see the last exercise of our ebook, okay? So here we're saying, let me zoom in. Ask user for a character. If the character is a letter in uppercase, print true, otherwise print false. Check the isUpper method. Let's see the isUpper method here. So if we open up the isUpper method, we can see that the isUpper method returns true if all the characters are in uppercase, otherwise false. Okay, so for example, in this trader self, the variable txt holds the phrase this is now, all uppercase, and then in our variable x we're gonna store whatever the isUpper will return. So we're gonna see if the variable txt is upper or not, and when we print we see that it's true. Okay, so this is exactly what we're gonna do in our case. So first, let's ask the user for a character. So I'm gonna create a variable char, and I'm gonna use here the input function, char. Okay, actually I'm gonna write it down, character. And then we're gonna use this isUpper. So I'm gonna create a variable called x, for example, and I'm gonna do char.isUpper. And whatever this is upper method will return to us, we're gonna print true or false. So if x equals true, we're going to print true. All right? Else, we're gonna print false. Okay? So let's see how it works using the debugger. Let me put here the breakpoint and let's run and debug. So this is a Python file, and here the terminal they're gonna ask us for a char. So for example, in here we're gonna read the next line. So here char will store whatever we type in here. So I'm gonna put a in lowercase, for example, and when I click enter here in the terminal we have char equals to a in lowercase. Now the variable x will store if char is upper or not, so it's going to store true or false. In this case, char holds the value a in lowercase, so the isUpper method will return us false. So here the variable x will be false, okay? And now we're going to check if x equals true, so x is equals to true. No, because right now x is false, so we're not going to enter in this if condition, and we're going to the else. And then, since we're going to the else, we're gonna print false. Okay? Let's try again. Now, let's try with things in uppercase. So, if I put this in here, let's wait. So, we're asking for a character. If I put now A in capital, and I click enter, now char is capital A, then what is the return of the isUpper? Since a is uppercase, the isUpper will return us true. Okay, so here x holds the value true. Now let's go to the if condition. So if x equals true, so if true, that is the value of x equals true, this condition is correct, so we're going to line 4 and we're gonna print true. Okay, so this is it for the problem. If you have any questions on here on the comment, if you would like to be one of our students in the Telegram group and this group coaching, check the description below, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.